Ukraine forces were outnumbered in Kharkiv 2.5 to 1, and they still beat the Russians. According to the 3rd Assault Brigade, within 4 days, the Russian forces suffered a loss of around 300 personnel and significant damage to their equipment and weapons. Now, it's true that Ukraine forces have lost ground to the Russians in the Pokrovsk and Donetsk regions, but Kharkiv is Ukraine's second largest city. If they can kick out all of the Russian forces from that region, then it expands Ukraine's military theater exponentially. Ukraine forces were already destroying Russian supply lines in Kharkiv before their invasion. 15 days after the invasion, Ukraine holds 1,200 square kilometers of Russian territory and punctured 2 kilometers into Russian-occupied regions of Kharkiv. Russia's ambassador to the US, Anatoly Antonov, has said, "I tell you sincerely that the president has made a decision. I am firmly convinced that everyone will be severely punished for what happened in Kursk." And I believe it. Every single Russian that Putin sees is going to get punished for Kursk. So clearly, Ukraine, even though vastly outnumbered, is gaining tactical and strategic supremacy over much larger Russia. I know a retired US soldier whose job it was to maintain US nuclear weapons in Germany during the 1960s. He had top secret clearance. He was constantly guarded by infantrymen because, of course, he had one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. And because of the sensitivity and importance of his job during the height of the Cold War, he was in frequent contact with his USSR counterparts, and the vast majority of them were Ukrainian. I've read historical accounts of this, but from his own words, he said that the Ukrainians were by far the brains of the entire Soviet Union, and Ukraine's utter humiliation of Russia proves it. Unless it comes to subjecting a terrified population, Russian leadership has known what to do, as evidenced by ISIS taking over one of the Russian prisons. After many hours, Russian forces were able to neutralize the threat, but only after they killed prison guards and took several people hostage. This is probably why Russia doesn't understand how simple it is to achieve peace, but this meme says it all. Speaking of criminals, another Russian mercenary leader just turned against Putin. George Sakrevsky, leader of the Paladin mercenary group, has said, "Our country is not just on the brink of the disaster or already next to it, our country is already in trouble. In big trouble." He called on Russians to get rid of the great Putin. He said, "Our air force is practically not working because it is also being pushed out. We are standing in the same positions that we took more than 2 years ago." He doesn't have the strength or influence to pull off what Prigozhin tried last year, but this is still a very telling sign. Back to the Ukraine invasion of Kursk. Ukraine forces have stated that they are now using US glide bombs in the Kursk region. And they are also using $400 drones to destroy $1 million Russian tanks. And one of these drone attacks is what destroyed the Russian oil depot Proletarsk in the Rostov region. Now this fire has lasted longer than the Great Moscow Fire of 1812. One of their brigades said that they would conduct as many as 5 search and destroy missions targeting Russian armor, vehicles, and troops. By armor, they mean tanks. And some of these drones have been approaching the Kursk nuclear power plant. While Russians are saying that this is nuclear terrorism, I would not be surprised if it was merely recon to make sure that Russians aren't the ones trying to sabotage the plant. But this photo is something you should be paying attention to right here. Putin just hosted a meeting with Narendra Modi last month, thinking that everything was well and good. Next month later, Modi is having breakfast with the enemy. Putin can't do anything about it because he's relying on India to keep buying their oil. In fact, they are now buying more oil from Russia than China. This is his first visit in modern Ukrainian history. And of course, Modi is urging for negotiations between Zelensky and Putin. But he knows very well that Ukraine will not stop until they win. I have an opinion on why they are both so stern. India has to officially act like the devil's advocate because they want to be on the good side of the West by supporting Ukraine, but they also need and are addicted to that cheap Russian oil. Also, Russia has nukes. And I think that's the same game that China has been playing as well. India is going to continue to use Russia as a gas station, and they'll most likely buy this cheap Russian oil and sell it to the Europeans. And warming up to Ukraine means warming up to the rest of the West and possibly gaining more access to Western markets. But it destroys Putin's illusion that either Russia or China or any other country is actually going to be loyal to him. My name is the Geo Husar, and tomorrow I'm going to talk about how much of your tax dollars are going into Ukraine. Thanks for watching.